Westgate shopping mall is under attack.
They are treating this as a terrorist attack.
Anything to do with terrorism almost always is done for the purpose of propaganda. Propaganda is the attempt to play to people's emotions, try and influence their thinking, try and influence their perceptions. And the terrorists understand what you and I understand, which is news values.
For the correspondent on the ground covering the siege, the editor trying to make sense of it from London, the academic researching the impact of new media on journalism, and the specialist in radical movements around the world, the first thing about the coverage of the Nairobi story was the location. The Kenyan capital is the de facto media capital of East Africa. Journalists were already there in big numbers. Al-Shabab brought the story right to their doorstep. And that was just phase one of the organization's media strategy.
It was different because in some countries in Africa, journalists have to be deployed from maybe the next country or maybe a country 5 or 6 boundaries away, or even sometimes from their headquarters in another continent. This was different in the case of Nairobi, and that is why it attracted so much international attention.
And it was interesting that on that same day there were 2 bomb blasts in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia, probably also carried out by the same group who carried out the attack on Westgate, Al-Shabab, and that received absolutely no media coverage because there are no international media organisations based there.
The concentration of journalists in East Africa, based in Kenya, has ensured that this story has gone global very quickly. It's ensured we're getting a range of different views, and of course in the scramble for coverage, lots of competing media outlets are going in different ways to try and get some kind of unique or exclusive coverage of the events.
Secondly, the fact that it was it's been long drawn. The international media generally cover an event and then move on. They've been here on this news item for around 3 days, which is relatively long, partly because the terrorists themselves wanted it to last long to attract as much attention as possible.
Typically, a terrorist act is pretty quick. It's a bomb going off somewhere and then the media gets there to deal with the aftermath. But as the attacks in Mumbai a few years ago have shown, you can create these real-time dramatic sequence of events where you storm a high-profile venue and then you essentially lay siege to it for several hours or several days, during which time you are guaranteeing ongoing rolling coverage.
The fact that there was basically 4 days of 24-hour news coverage and with Al-Shabab being very clever in the way that they were releasing information on social media and speaking to a select number of journalists.
The terror group claiming responsibility is using Twitter, and here's some of what they're saying, quote, only non-believers were singled out for this attack.
It meant that they were kind of drip feeding that hungry media with sound bites.
One of their tweets reads, "The message we are sending to the Kenyan government and public is, and always has been, just one. Remove all your forces from our country."
A lot of my Somali colleagues and friends were very upset about that, journalists being a mouthpiece for Al-Shabab.
Al-Shabab is media savvy, very good at making use of media to articulate their point of view. And they have taken on social media, and particularly Twitter. They are usually updated by people who have got a very good grasp of the English language. But Twitter kept on closing their accounts, one after another. But every time Al-Shabab had its Twitter accounts closed, in less than an hour, they will create another account and direct the media, particularly those operating in East Africa, to their new page, and almost instantly gaining hundreds and thousands of followers.
Al-Shabab has also been at the forefront really of the various different jihadist outfits in harnessing the power of new social media such as Twitter. You don't get that from other branches of Al-Qaeda, but in this case you can get direct emails from the Al-Shabab leadership saying, this is our view of what's happening on the ground. So you're able to get real-time information from them and direct communication in a way that you don't from other chapters.
And you could see the desperation of the Kenyan authorities who were pleading on Twitter and other forms of social media, as well as in the regular media, for journalists and others to please stop their wall-to-wall sort of indiscriminate coverage. There was a certain image posted on the front page of a Kenyan newspaper that was a highly graphic image of a woman basically screaming with blood all over her face. And this was one that prompted a huge amount of criticism.
I saw it before it was published. I saw it on the internet and I was extremely disturbed by that image. The following day, it was the main blown up front page picture of the Sunday Nation. And that particular image was distasteful.
We apologize to the family of the victim and to our readers.
I read the apology by the CEO of the Nation Media Group, Mr. Linus Itahi. I think if we make errors of judgment, as the Nation called it, we should be prepared to accept and, if necessary, face the consequences.
Images used to be sterile, they used to be censored from public view in the most graphic sense. But I think given what's happening with the internet now, given that so many people are able to access very gruesome videos and pictures, I think the mainstream media is saying if they don't show their readers or viewers these kinds of images, they'll find them anyway. So in a sense, we're all becoming a little more desensitized to these things than we were in the past.
Journalism is supposed to answer the basic questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. But sometimes there's a better question to ask than why, and that question is, why now?
Al-Shabab's area, the area it controls in Somalia, is shrinking. They've just emerged from a leadership tussle, which led to Ahmed Abdi Godane, the current leader, getting the upper hand against some of his opponents who were killed.
Al-Shabab has suffered a number of internal schisms, power struggles and disputes, and its detractors from within the organization have taken to Twitter themselves to voice their own criticisms. And so at times you've seen this rather undignified to and fro between Al-Shabab supporters and members and their detractors. So in a way, Twitter has proved to be, as I say, useful for Al-Shabab on one hand and a curse in the other.
Al-Shabab says it attacked to force Kenya to pull its troops out of Somalia, but the movement's leaders were under the gun from within. If the real objective was, as the saying goes, to change the conversation, the media strategy was simple, brutal, and effective. Go to the media capital of East Africa, terrorize the innocent, and let the cameras take care of the rest. Our Global Village Voice is now on the coverage of the attacks in Nairobi.
As news of the Nairobi Westgate Mall attack broke, we experienced the best and the worst of social media, and the whole incident provided an instructive case study of the state of journalism in general. On the one hand, Facebook and Twitter in particular provided invaluable, real-time updates about the quickly unfolding events on the ground. On the other hand, the contradictory and sometimes false information that trickled through these platforms worked to confuse more than inform.
Kenyan media did a good job in covering the Westgate saga. There was a lot of restraint. It doesn't come as a surprise that the allegations that the published graphic images, which are sensationalist, if you compare it to social media, they were very graphic and so did images. But on the other hand, Kenyan media tried to present verified information, and therefore they need to be commended for a good job.